Welcome to the Startups and AI podcast. Today, I'm joined by Anton, who's the founder of VideoGen, which is a VC-backed company. Welcome to the show, Anton.
Great. Thank you for having me on, Gaurav.
I would love to learn about when you decided to build VideoGen. What was like the original problem you were trying to solve?
Sure. The original problem that we were trying to solve was pretty simple. Video editing was super hard. It was super manual and very tedious. We started VideoGen like more than 3 years ago, like right before the launch of ChatGPT. My co-founder and I, we've been friends for a while. We met way back in middle school, and we were always interested in online communities and online media. So I had done some freelance video editing, some freelance web design, and graphic design as well. He'd also done like web design, web development. So we always wanted to do something where we're creating like media, whether it's like websites or videos or graphics. And then after the launch of ChatGPT, we saw like, okay, we can use these LLMs to maybe automate a lot of tedious parts of video editing. So specifically, we were focused on sourcing stock content and clipping it in place relative to a script. So this is a common workflow for like e-learning videos or like explainer style videos or sort of these like online lecture style videos. You'll have a script and you just want to show relevant B-roll at each section. So the first version of VideoGen was very simple. We had one workflow, which was script to video, and that's still our most popular workflow to this day. And you put in a script, the AI is going to go source a bunch of B-roll for you and clip it in place, which saves editors a ton of time. To actually do that, we had to index massive amounts of copyright-free libraries and actually label like, one of the key things that sets us apart is like everything on our platform is copyright free. So like before VideoGen, you had to have like 4 tabs open, like one on each stock media site, and then you'd have your video editor open, and then you would like play a little part of the script, switch, take a like do a search, find a stock asset, put it back. So that was the initial problem that we tried to solve, and since then it's expanded to now trying to do different formats and styles of videos.
Awesome. Yeah, that's amazing. It seems like, so 3 years ago, I don't think we had like video models like Veo, Sora out at that point. So walk me through like how did things evolve, when these video models started coming out and, companies go through product market fit changes, like how did things evolve with VideoGen?
Things have changed quite a lot in the past 3 years, especially with the video models. So Sora was, Sora is now being discontinued, but when OpenAI launched Sora, that kind of was like the big moment where everyone realized, okay, like video models are a thing. Before Sora, there were a few models that had come out, but they were mostly experimental and hadn't really been used like at scale. Sora was, I would say, the first big step that created the demand almost for generative video and like told people that like all across the world, because Sora was an app that was like global from day one almost. So it showed people across the world that you can generate videos from text, like entire scenes, like almost as if you're like a movie director. So the biggest difference is just switching from mostly stock content to now a mix between generative content, stock content, and user uploaded content. We generally find that the best videos will use like a combination of multiple types of content, especially like now one of our largest segments is marketing. So customers will be making videos about their product or about their brand. So they need to upload images of their logo, for example, and they'll use generative video to animate that into a logo sequence. They might upload images of their product, and then they'll use generative video and generative image on our platform to show different angles of that product or show someone using the product. So it's expanded the possibilities of the types of videos that people can create on like a smaller budget or when they have a small asset library to work with. And for us, it's been pretty amazing because our target users, we typically work with like smaller businesses, startups, or small teams within large organizations. So they're not going to have like a whole budget to hire a film crew to create like a huge library of like hours of video footage for their product, for example. They might only have 5 images of their product. So now they can take those and actually get like a usable library of ads that they can promote like for the next year. They can create an entire library of different ads with different angles of that product and different like messaging types.
Yeah, that's super cool. And it seems like this is one of the most disruptive technologies, all the way from like filmmaking to entertainment to education. Everything could be disrupted with this. Like, how do you think about focusing on the most important problem for VideoGen? Because you could expand into, so many different domains. And like one of the challenges early founders have is like, how do you stay focused? So like, walk me through your thought process there. How do you make those decisions, stay focused?
Yeah. So when we started, it was a little bit less of a challenge because there wasn't like that many things that you could solve with AI within video because you couldn't. It was also not just before generative video, but generative image models were not very good back then. Like keep in mind, this is before DALL-E 1 was announced. So I think we had like image gen from Google, and we didn't have usable models at scale that were like cost effective and fast and produce high quality results. So there actually wasn't that much different directions that we could have gone, which forced us to focus. And maybe I guess that helped us in a way. And maybe that's something that I would recommend is finding, if you're like an early startup founder, finding a problem space where you're almost constrained because it's such a new problem, or there's like maybe a new technology which is enabling you, where you're almost limited by the technology, or you're limited by like the people just starting to understand the problem of what you can solve. And then the hope is that you choose a problem space that ends up growing and expanding. So in our case, we started with AI and video production. When we started, we were actually one of the first AI native video platforms. It wasn't really a thing back then because there was only like 2 workflows that you could successfully do. And then, a year, 2 years later, after we had built up a customer base and a team, we could start to expand and think about segmenting our product and segmenting our marketing. So I think you have to be, there is definitely a way to stay focused in a super crowded market, but I think the best advice is to just choose a market that's maybe a little bit underserved, where there's like very clear and narrow problems for you to solve, and then expand within that as the market grows.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's great advice. Did you always want to be an entrepreneur? When did you decide, like don't want to work, or, when did you decide to be an entrepreneur? Tell me about your journey.
I'd always been an entrepreneur. So my first gig was actually video editing. I was 11 years old, and I would use Fiverr. I don't know if you're familiar with
Yeah.
Fiverr. But for the audience, if you're a freelancer, you can basically post these gigs, say like, I'm going to do this service for you for $5. That was the idea. So I was selling video editing services for $5 a piece. I would edit people's like logos and create these like animations, like 2D logo transition animations. So I think I was always interested. Um, like I always liked the idea of providing like direct value to a client, if that makes sense. And I also like the idea of having control over my own schedule and like the end-to-end work that I'm producing. So that was just the gig on Fiverr, but I ended up getting into graphic design. I did a little bit of like everything while I was just playing around on Fiverr, but I started doing logo design and web design, and that's something that I did all the way through high school and then even into college, where I started doing like more serious web development. It was never full time. I'd usually have one client at a time, but I would make a little bit of side income, and was building up my portfolio for. I was always kind of thinking of the next client that I would be working with. So I think, I don't know, I just always was interested in working with customers. I was always interested in having my own schedule, and there was never really a moment where I didn't want to be an entrepreneur.
Nice. Yeah, and
Yeah.
it also seems like you've always been in this like video editing, generative like video sort of domain all this time. So it seems like it's one of your passions, and you got to build like something you've been like possibly always passionate about and wanted to do. What happened next? Like you decided you wanted to build VideoGen. Like tell me
hmm
about that process, like how you got your first customers, and then like when did you decide you wanted to raise? What was that
hmm
process like?
So we started it in college. My co-founder was at Brown. I was at UMass, and was at our junior years, I think, or early junior year. We spent 6 months building out the MVP. We weren't doing it full time. It was more of, okay, let's just build something for fun. Hopefully it takes off. Worst case, it'll be useful and we'll learn a lot, and then maybe take it on to our next idea. And for context, even though the plan was to be an entrepreneur, like, I was definitely like, okay, maybe I'll work a job for a few years after college and then start something in the future. We launched it after 6 months. The first version, again, you would put in a script and then it would just clip stock footage to that script. and I would add like captions and AI narration as well. And we posted it across a bunch of these different listing sites. So we actually didn't do Product Hunt at the time, which I think is the most popular one, but we did like I can't even remember the names because I had a spreadsheet of I think 200 different sites to where you can launch your startup, and I just manually posted it on every single one. And I remember also I was going on Quora, and I would people that would say, "What's a good video editor that's easy to use?" I would reply to them and say, "Hey, you could use VideoGen." So the first week was just super manual, just posting it on everywhere that we could find. And because it was a pretty new problem and there wasn't that many other easy to use video editors, especially an online video editor that you don't need to download, we got some pretty early traction, like a few thousand, I think 2,000 or so signups in the first month.
Oh wow.
And then on day one, we already had our payment integrated at the time. I think it was $5 a month. So we got a few customers within the first week who they found it useful. We basically like you could make the video, but then in order to export it, you had to pay for the subscription. And we got a few customers in the first week, and the site was pretty buggy back then, so we had to do a lot of refunds. But we just kind of continued to fix the bugs. We didn't add too many features in the beginning. It was mostly like making it more reliable, making it faster. We also were improving our like AI algorithm that would actually find the stock, and we were adding more assets to our library. It was almost like a year-long period where we were just adding more and more assets to our library. So we would add, now it's like tens of millions of assets that are like indexed, and that the AI is actually like has like information on like what goes on throughout the video. Yeah. And then that was in, I think, June of 2023. So I was interning at Amazon at the time. My co-founder was at Palantir. It was kind of a dream internship on paper, but as I was there, it wasn't like quite the work that I was looking for. I think I was always interested, and I always liked coding and developing software, but I got into it from more of a design perspective and a visual perspective. So I wanted to do web design. I wanted to do like UI design and then like front end development, or at least like full stack. But I wanted to do something where I can like, feel what I'm creating and see how the users interact with it. And at Amazon, specifically, I was at AWS. I was just doing like infrastructure, cool work, but it just wasn't what I like saw myself doing for the long haul. So I decided, this is not the route that I want to go. Our app basically kept taking off. I think it was in October we hit 100,000 users, and we had like a decent amount of MRR, and I decided to drop out of college and just focus on it full time. My co-founder was still in college. He was like, "No, I'm going to graduate." So I was like, "Okay, that's fine. Like I'll focus on it full time. We're going to grow the company, and by the time that you graduate, we're going to raise venture, and then you won't have to take your job offer." So there was like a 6-month period where I was just focused on a lot of my work. It was kind of 50-50 between marketing and like development. So, and this was before vibe coding. So you had to, yeah, it was a lot of work to actually like build, video editor. Even today, you have to build out a lot of like video infrastructure. So, all the videos, we have to have them in the right encodings. We have to make sure that they're ready for like adaptive streaming to different devices on different Wi-Fi speeds. And then because it's an editor, if there's a full timeline with multiple different layers, so you can imagine how complicated that can get to make sure that it's like performant, reliable, and accurate. And then when you export, it has to send that entire video object out to the cloud. So we spent a lot of time building out all the kind of mechanics of getting the video infrastructure correct. And then also a lot of time, like I was more focused on the front end. My co-founder was more focused on the infrastructure. That's just a lot of time on the user experience, getting like all those little micro interactions correct, making sure that the sign up is easy, making sure that, sharing your video is easy, making sure that we have like emails like that, oh, you exported your video. Now let's make sure we email it to the customer, and let's make sure that we're sending our product announcements. So it was a ton of different stuff that we were doing. And then we always wanted to do YC because I think it was kind of the most notable of like early stage startup accelerators. So as soon as my co-founder graduated, we applied to YC and we got into the summer 24 batch. Because we had been growing it for like almost a year before that, we had a decent amount of traction. So we felt pretty confident going in. And yeah, since then, it's been kind of like scaling, hiring, bringing on new customers, adding new workflows. and growing the company.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an amazing journey. And getting to, I think you said like almost 100,000 users before even like thinking about raising. I think like that's like an amazing place to be. What's been the most surprising thing for you over the like in the last couple of years, since you launched? Obviously, we talk about back in the day, we couldn't even like buy code marketing. And when you really think about it, it's just like 1 year ago or, things have changed a
It's
lot.
not that long.
It's not that long. It's not like a decade ago. Things have changed. So,
Yeah.
what's been the most surprising things for you over the past couple of years?
I mean, that's definitely the most surprising, like the how quickly uh, the AI models have accelerated. It happened first for us with vibe coding. Like, I mean, we use Cursor internally, and I mean, usually right now I'm using like Fable and Opus. And yeah, just the pace at which when it first started, it was just like, okay, we have Stack Overflow, but a little bit better on ChatGPT. But I think it was hard to see at the time like how quickly the AI would be able to write a lot of code and then write tests for the code. That said, there's still it's funny how it's doing a lot of the actual coding, but it's really not doing the engineering. Like basically, like every engineer now is sort of turning into like an engineering manager or like a tech lead, but they still need to be a great engineer to actually build like useful software. So that's been number one most surprising. Is just the acceleration of the coding models, and then now what's surprising is we're starting to see that in video creation, which is exciting for us. Like literally up until I mean, even earlier this year, most of our like power users were still using stock and their own assets. And for the first time, we're actually seeing like generative content is like good enough and reliable enough where, and for context, like these are more professional users. So if you're a consumer, you could use something like Sora to get like a viral or like a funny video. But the types of content that we're focused on, these marketing and training videos, have like a pretty high bar for professionalism. Like, the AI can't have a person with four hands, or it can't have like a text that's like completely like misspelled. So we're starting to see it with AI image and AI video on our platform, and that's super exciting and surprising. Like if you had asked me, I mean, I think we did talk about this when we launched VideoGen, and I think we estimated it would be like 5 years until there's like any reasonable AI video model. And I think it took like 2.5 years basically.
Yeah. Yeah, I think like VO3 probably changed the game, and then for image, like Nano Banana was like that Chat GPT moment where like you were starting to get like consistent text, and then like I know like people start animate, like they create images and then they start like animating those, and yeah,
Hmm.
everyone's becoming like an artist now with this model. Yeah, the pace at which like things have grown have been like pretty surprising. That spaghetti eating Will Smith,
Yeah, the
that
Will Smith.
that that's
Yeah.
been like pretty. Yeah, even these days, like it's hard to tell if it's like fake or real video. It's getting pretty insane. So where do you think we are heading now? Like, because it seems like we're on an exponential path. Like, where do we go in 2027? What are some of your predictions?
So in 2027, and it already is the case that it's about half of content now uploaded to social media, or at least YouTube, is produced with AI. So I think in 2027, we're going to see the majority of video content uploaded to the internet is produced like mostly with AI using platforms like VideoGen or one of our competitors, or maybe just calling the models directly. I think that the platforms are going to need to figure out how to basically filter out all this content. Like right now, there's an analogy of the printing press. So when the printing press was first invented, there's a theory that goes, now people could basically, other than the government and the church in Europe, they could print a book and then sound like authoritative. So there was a bunch of basically charlatans or people that were trying to, opportunistically take advantage of people, would print these books and then try to build a following and sort of like trick people with maybe try to build their own religions or build their own like they were trying to sell their products or build their own like mini kingdoms. So there was a huge onslaught of books, and people just at the time, if they read a book, they would be like, okay, this is legit because the only people that create books are like the people that I trust. And the theory goes that because of that, basically scholars came up with the idea of citations, and they said, okay, like we can't just trust every book for how it's created. We need to trust it based on how many other books are referring to it. And then that led to the scientific revolution, where this new way of basically saying which books do we trust, which pieces of text are valuable, actually allowed us to rank which ones are the most important. And then that foundation actually created the Renaissance and the scientific revolution. And the day, it even trickles down to Google, where you're ranking sites based on citations. So I don't think this will happen in 2027, but the social media platforms are now responsible for figuring out, how do we filter out like bad AI content, and how do we surface high quality AI content, or just content in general. The current algorithms just weren't quite built to handle this type of this volume and this type of content. And people are starting to realize, okay, like there's just too much slop on the internet, or there's too much like low effort content. So I think that, the majority of content is going to be produced by AI. And within that, there's going to be a lot of very good content, but there's going to be even more very bad content. And the platforms are going to start reworking their algorithms. And I think right now they're already doing that, and it's quite experimental, but they're going to try to figure out a new way to surface and recommend content to you. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's actually a new platform that arises in, let's say, 2030 or maybe even sooner, that just kind of fundamentally rethinks like how do we share and discover content online. Like the endless scroll on TikTok is maybe not the best way. Like the YouTube homepage and feed, is starting to get corrupted. So maybe we just need like a fundamental new way to discover, rank, and share content.
Yeah, yes. I think that's super interesting. And I mean, there's been a lot of like negatives as well of, like these endless videos that are being created, like brain rot content, which must not be good for like, brains of, especially of like kids.
Mhm.
So it seems like it's the tech that we have in front of us is going to have like consequential things for like the entire civilization. It seems like. What do you think about, people saying there might be not enough jobs for humans? Like there's already like layoffs in tech. What do you think in terms of like where, if models keep growing, improving at this pace, maybe they'll be able to do like autonomously the entire job of like some of the humans would be, that, for example, like for video generation, maybe there used to be editor, a writer, but maybe they could be just an agent that does all of it. And then there's just, one human that supervises. But what do you think
Yeah.
about what's the future of jobs?
So I think that there's going to be no shortage of jobs in the long-term future. If you just look at history, there's many times where we automated or streamlined one part of work. The Industrial Revolution is probably the most obvious. And it's not like the Industrial Revolution replaced all jobs and now like we don't have any labor and we don't have any people working. That said, there is a transitional period where society and businesses and the government is figuring out how do we adapt to this new technology. So jobs change, and some jobs are going to get created and then other jobs are going to get lost. So in the long term, like in the next, in a decade and 2 decades, I do think that we're going to have plenty of jobs, and that there's not going to be this kind of mass apocalypse where, humans have lost all life purpose. I think if you were to look at the majority of at least like American office jobs today and actually think about, okay, like what are these people actually doing? It's pretty made up. Like, it's not like they're growing food, or it's not like we're, building shelters. The types of things we're doing are so kind of disconnected from like the human foundations, but we still find a way to provide value to one another. We still find a way to come up with kind of competitions where there's like for example, I mean, sports, right? Like there's a huge sector of jobs within sports. People love watching sports. People love playing sports. They like buying sports materials. There's a whole economy built around sports, and AI is not going to replace sports. Like no one's going to be watching like AIs play soccer against each other. So I think you can see that across every single domain where the types of jobs that we're doing are something where like the human element is kind of core to it, where you can't just replace it with AI. Like it's not about the systematic efficiency. It's actually about like the process itself and like about the competition and the people that are involved. So that's the long-winded answer to, I don't think that we'll ever see like some mass apocalypse where people never have jobs. But in the short term, I do think there's like, especially in tech and in people working in like online work, there's definitely a lot of change. I mean, we see it in like video editing, where a lot of our customers, they're video editors, but now they're sort of going through the same thing that myself as a software, or like now I'm not writing as much software, but as a software developer was experiencing, where you're going from a coder who's like manually writing lines of code and validating them to sort of like a tech lead where you are directing this AI agent and you're still doing engineering, but it just feels very different. And you kind of like don't understand the workflow fully yet. We're starting to see the same things with video editors and just creatives in general. And that is leading to change. And I think that change is also going to be widely impacted by those algorithms that the distribution platforms like YouTube and Instagram and Facebook and TikTok, like how they choose to change their algorithms to better filter out and like surface the best content. So I do think in the short term, if you're working in like online fields, if you're creative, if you're a software developer, if you're like, a remote worker, there's a lot of change. And I think the people that are going to succeed are the ones that are going to figure out how to leverage AI to basically upskill to be like a manager. Uh, and I think that the people that might struggle are the ones that basically aren't able to find that leverage unless they're in maybe the top 1% of their field. Like if you are like, an exceptional video editor, like that's not what AI is going to be replacing. But if you're in that kind of like middle 80% where you're a decent video editor, but you're producing more formulaic content, like you probably need to start thinking about leveraging AI to accelerate what you're doing, or switching maybe to a different field altogether if it's not something you're passionate about.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. I totally agree. I think, like, especially in entertainment, we always find ways to entertain ourselves. There could be like infinite amount of games. Like people even compete playing video games and watch each other playing video games. And then there could be like arts, like yeah, there could be like infinite amount of sports.
Mm-hmm.
And then, yeah, using AI, you could be like as creative as you want to be. Like everyone could be also a filmmaker in a way. So there could be like previously, if only like 100 people could be filmmakers, now there could be 1 million people, like potentially. So
Mm-hmm.
I think definitely like jobs will change. Like we never had social media influencers 15 years ago. That was not a job. And now that's
Yeah.
like the hottest job, maybe. Similar to that, we probably are going to have, yeah, I don't know, like rock star AI managers. Yeah. So I think, like you said, there's going to be a lot of disruption because there's going to be
Mm-hmm.
change. And if you, people who are opposed to change, who just want to do things like the old way, might face more issues. But yeah, I think like society will adapt like we did with the internet. Yeah. What advice do you have for someone like if someone, I think also another thing is like, I think there's going to be a lot more entrepreneurs. Now it's the barrier to entry to be an entrepreneur is very low. Like,
Mm-hmm.
previously you needed to have maybe a team of 3 developers at least to initially build something, but now you could just build your MVP pretty fast. You could even
Mm-hmm.
do like sales marketing. If you were to start today, like what would you build and like what would be some of the, things you want to share with like someone who's starting today?
Yeah. In starting today, there's a bunch of like niche kind of B2B problems that I've now discovered now that I'm running a company. These are things that I'm maybe not super passionate about, but I've been so annoyed about that if I were to start a new company, I would maybe go and solve them. So it's just like some of these like finance workflows are very like outdated and you have a lot of manual paperwork and you almost feel it a lot more today because especially if you're a developer, like you've been vibe coding and like how streamlined a good workflow can feel. And then you have to deal with this like manual paperwork, like these invoicing workflows can be quite manual, like accounts payable, accounts receivable. In our field, it's not even that bad because video is not like a super regulated field. But if like in healthcare and like regulated fields, these like kind of basic flows of like this person needs to send money to someone else, there's just like so many intermediaries, there's so much paperwork, and AI can do a lot to just read the paperwork and extract information and basically automate these tedious jobs that there's already a shortage of in the first place. Like there's a huge shortage of accountants. And I think within that field in general, these kind of like manual billing work, there's a shortage. A lot of the people right now are basically like well, I don't know the generation before Boomer, but they're basically about to retire.
Hmm.
So there's a huge need for automation. So I think that's definitely good if you want to do like a kind of predictable, reliable company. You only need a few clients and you can get up and running, I think, pretty quickly if you understand the problem and take the time to really solve it. And I think, sorry, it was a two-part question, or was that you said what
Yeah,
advice would you give and what?
yeah. Where would you start? And then, like, what advice would you have for like someone who's starting? Like, how to get started? Like some of the
Mhm.
lessons maybe you've learned that you can share that people can
Yeah.
keep in mind when they're starting.
I can share, I mean, maybe like definitely having a co-founder is super important. Like if I didn't have my business partner, it would just be a lot like less fun. Someone who, I mean, it's tough, right? Because you want someone who you know is going to work hard and is going to keep you accountable, but also someone who like you enjoy working with and spending time with, who's like a friend of yours or at least like a coworker that you like spending time with. So finding a business partner to work with, I think is like definitely the most effective thing you can do. Because the reality is, like most entrepreneurs, you're not going to see. I mean, like for us, right? It took us 6 months before we even launched that first version, and then a few other months before we were able to sustain. And then, I mean, it was a year before we actually achieved venture capital funding and like were able to hire. So if I didn't have my co-founder, there's just no way that I would have been able to stick it out through all of that. Like it's just, yeah, you need someone to hold you accountable, I think. And then the second thing I would say, if you're like a software founder and you want to build something with tech, I would say just leverage like APIs, like good APIs. Like a common mistake that I'll see people do is they will try to, they basically, the pattern is like they enjoy working with AI and they try to use like kind of local models. They try to host their own GPUs. And unless your intent is to build like an infrastructure company, like you shouldn't be trying to manage complicated infrastructure, in my opinion, especially in the early stages. So I would say build on top of like easy to use, pre-built end-to-end APIs when you can. And then if you scale to like Series A or beyond, then you can think about building out your own infrastructure. And so that would be my technical advice. It's like you can waste a lot of time and resources trying to manage like Kubernetes, right? Like people will have like a whole Kubernetes cluster set up and they'll have like 100 users, and it's like you could just be using something much simpler. So
Yeah.
yeah, keep it simple and find a good co-founder.
Yeah, that's, I think, amazing advice. Buy versus build. Like, there's a lot of these services you could just use to get up and running. You don't need to build the auth, for example.
Yeah.
Just use all these services that are available. Use and yeah, just host it on the cloud. It's like not that expensive, and like you said, unless you're like into infrastructure. And yeah, I mean, finding a good co-founder also, like one of the big reasons why startups fail is also because the co-founders don't gel along. So that's like, it's one
Mm-hmm.
of the biggest advantages, but also like biggest disadvantage if you don't do it right. Like in your case, you already knew, you were friends.
Mm-hmm.
But if like if someone's trying to find a co-founder on platforms like YC has a co-founder matching, things like that,
Mm.
that
I mean,
could
I
be
have
tough.
heard some success stories.
Yeah.
I've heard some success stories. Like, I mean, imagine like the success rate's probably pretty low, but it's worth trying. I mean, I think that what's tough is if you're doing founder matching. I mean, it's almost like dating. You're not really gonna know the person until you've worked with them and spent like a substantial amount of time. So it's tough. I mean, I know the stories that I've heard, like where it works the best is people that are friends, people that have worked together in a previous company and like they know each other's work ethic. Because like it's definitely easy to choose someone who you get along with, but maybe isn't the best like work fit. Yeah, I mean, you also want someone who like matches your skill set. Like myself, I'm more, I mean, on the technical side, I just enjoy like front end and design more. I also like marketing, and so I'm on like that side. And then my co-founder really enjoys like infrastructure and full stack and back end engineering and algorithms. So it's like we complement each other's skill sets in a way where it's like we're not always stepping on each other's toes, but we still understand each of each other's pieces enough where we can work together. So you don't want to choose someone who's exactly like you, because then if you like marketing and you choose someone who likes marketing, like who's going to do the sales or who's going to do the
Engineering.
like service? So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Absolutely. Any final piece of advice, or like something that you find like motivation in? Like what inspires you in your work that you can share?
Maybe it's a bit cliche. I mean, I'm inspired by like seeing our customers happy, and like when I have a conversation with a customer, and or if they send me a video and I see that like they're happy with the result, that it saved them time, that it saved them money. I think it's always been, I just get a lot of like satisfaction from seeing something that I built is providing value to another person. And what's nice about that motivation is that it's lasts no matter like how the product shifts or how the technology shifts or the market. So I think it's good, especially right now. So many things are changing. If you can find like a motivation that is going to last through, like don't fall in love with the work necessarily, fall in love with like what the work creates in a way. Yeah, I think. And then I mean, my other thing that motivates me is just I like working with the people that I'm working with.
Hmm.
So again, it goes back to having a good co-founder, and also like now I have a team that I enjoy working with that, we've been together now for more than a year. So most of the core team. So yeah, I just like working with the people and I like seeing our customers happy.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, isn't that the point of the company?
Yeah.
Building. If you want to be a successful businessman, I mean, you have to build a service or a product that people love. And if a few people love your product, you're definitely in the right direction. Anton, it's been a pleasure talking to you and listening to like tons of great advice. Thank you for your time, and well, all the best for future success for VideoGen.
Thank you so much, Garb, and thank you for having me on. It was great. But you had some good questions, so it was great being on.
Awesome.